Short is the story, long is the life.
Wukong's archive presents China Urban Legends, The 7 Archways of Tangyue.
Before going to Tangyue Village in Qi County, the old curator of the Provincial Cultural Center called me to his office and gave me one specific warning. He said, "This trip, you're going to make rubbings of the inscriptions on the memorial archways. However you do it during the day is fine, but keep this one sentence in your heart. At night, don't walk under the archways." I didn't take it seriously at the time. Archways, after all, they're just stone, what could happen? In the autumn of 2005, I carried my rubbing kit, rice paper, and ink, and took a bus to Qi County. When we crossed the Lian River, the water outside the window was muddy, and the sky was gray. On both banks, white walls and black tile roofs pressed one upon another, the horsehead walls sticking up high like rows of upright ears. Tangyue Village lay to the west of Qi County, on Zhengsuan town's land. At the village entrance was a grain-drying ground, and beside it stood 7 archways in a row, from west to east, 3 from the Ming, 4 from the Qing. I stood at the edge of the ground and counted once, then again 7, not one missing. The stone had been bitten by wind and rain for centuries. The characters on the archway plaques had developed a patina, and stone lions crouched under the pillars, their eyes rubbed smooth and shining. It was just past 4 in the afternoon, with the sun slanting in. The 7 archways cast long shadows, lying level across the drying ground, like 7 closed doors. The man who received me was Bao Wenyuan, 73, keeper of the Bao Ancestral Hall. The Bao family was the big surname in Tangyue. Their ancestors had been salt merchants, and all 7 archways belonged to the Bao family. Bao Wenyuan set me up in a side room of the old Bao residence. The old house had 3 courtyards. In the skywell grew an old osmanthus tree. In the center of the main hall hung a plaque with 4 characters: Chastity, fierce as ice and frost. The signature below had been eaten by insects and couldn't be read.
Dinner was made by Bao Wenyuan, braised pork with preserved mustard greens, and a plate of hairy tofu. Halfway through, I brought up what the old curator had said. Bao Wenyuan set down his chopsticks and looked at me for a long while. Then he said, "The curator is right. Archways, these things, in the daytime they're for the living to see. At night, they're not."
I asked what they were, then. He said, "The rule in this village is, after the high hour, 9 to 11 p.m., you don't walk under an archway. If you need to pass, go around, take the field ridges, take the edge of the drying ground, whatever you like. Just don't go under. Not under any of the 7. And especially not that one in the middle, the Chastity Filial Piety Archway for Wu, second wife of Bao Wenyuan. That one, after the high hour, don't even step on the patch of ground beneath it."
As he spoke, a wind picked up in the skywell, and the osmanthus leaves rustled. I asked him why that one in particular. He didn't answer. He got up and went to the kitchen to feed the fire, his back flickering in the lamplight. That night I lay in bed and heard something walking in the skywell. Its steps were very light, one step, like a woman in embroidered shoes treading on the blue-gray bricks. I got up to look. The skywell was empty. The moonlight was white as frost.
The 7 archways of Tangyue, that's a long story. The Bao family moved to Tangyue at the end of the Southern Song Dynasty and farmed and studied there for generations. By the Ming Dynasty, the clan produced high officials. Bao Huangshan served as vice minister of war, and when he retired and returned home, he built an ancestral hall, set up charity fields, and established rules for the clan one by one. After the early Qing, the Bao family turned to commerce. Their boys left home at 13 or 14 to learn business, running to Hankou, Suzhou, Yangzhou, selling salt, opening pawn shops, trading tea. There's an old saying in Huizhou: "In a past life you did no good, so you were born in Huizhou. At 13 or 14, you're thrown out the door. The men went out. The women stayed home, keeping the children, keeping the house, keeping a lamp burning. The women of Tangyue lived identical lives. At dawn they lit the fire and cooked. At dusk they stitched shoe soles and waited for letters. A husband would be away 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. A letter would come, but the man might not. When the man did come home, he'd stay 2 months and leave again. When a new bride entered the family, the first thing her mother-in-law taught her was to recognize the road. Not the village roads, but the road leading to the Tangyue dock. The mother-in-law would say, "The day your man comes back, he'll come back by that road. Every evening, stand at the edge of the threshing ground and look. If you see him, go home and boil water. If you don't see him, don't stand too long. If you stand too long, the wind is strong." Once the Bao family got rich, they started to want fame. In Huizhou, status was earned by 2 kinds of stone: the merit tablet and the archway. The hardest archway to get was the Chastity archway. If the clan produced a virtuous widow, one who had kept her chastity for 30 full years and raised her orphans to adulthood, the clan had to file papers, report it up through each level. The county magistrate approved, the prefect verified, the Ministry of Rights reviewed, and only when the emperor gave permission could the archway be erected. On the day the archway went up, the widow had to wear her wedding dress and walk beneath it once, and the whole village came to watch. This tradition sounded glorious, but carrying it out was like squeezing oil out of bones. Of the 7 archways, 2 were chastity archways. One was the filial and chaste archway of Bao Wenyuan's wife, née Wang, erected during the Qianlong era. The other was the filial and chaste archway of Bao Wenyuan's second wife, née Wu. The village elders say people are crushed beneath both of them. Of the 7 archways, the oldest is the first one at the village entrance. The Shaoli archway, the archway of filial piety and kindness. At the end of the Yuan dynasty, bandits entered the village, caught hold of Bao Wenyuan, and were about to kill him. His son Bao Shaosan rushed up, grabbed the bandit's leg, and said, "Kill me. Let my father go." The father said, "I've lived long enough. Kill me." Father and son argued over who would die. The bandit stared, stunned, and said, "This village actually has a father and son like this, and let the man go." During the Yongle reign, the emperor learned of this and bestowed 3 characters, Shaoli, filial piety and kindness, and erected this archway. The villagers have told this story for hundreds of years, and they always end it the same way. That was an archway men earned. The women's archways weren't earned. They were endured. The story of Huangshan is recorded in the clan genealogy, and everyone in the village knows it. Huangshan married into the Bao family at 18. Her husband, Bao Wenyuan, was a scholar who died of illness in the 3rd year of their marriage, leaving behind a son still nursing. That year Huangshan was 21. Someone in the clan advised her. She was young, without too many burdens. She could return to her natal family, find another husband, and live a better life. Huangshan said nothing. She carried her child back to her own room and shut the door. After closing that door, Huangshan never left the village again. The villagers remember that every evening she stood at her own front door, gazing toward the direction of the Tangyue dock, gazing in the rain, gazing in the snow. Someone asked her what she was looking at. She wouldn't say. Later, when her son was grown, he asked her once, and she said, "When your father left, he said he'd go to Hangzhou, make money, and come back. I'm looking to see how far along he's gotten." She said this for 40 years. In the 2nd year of her chastity, a neighbor auntie passed by her house at night and heard someone inside talking. A man and a woman, neither voice loud. The auntie thought someone was in Huangshan's house, so she asked her the next day. Huangshan said, "There's no one, just me and the child." The auntie said, "I heard 2 people. Huangshan lowered her head and said after a long pause, "That was me talking to him. He can't hear me. I'm just saying it to him." This one wait lasted 40 years. She raised her child all alone, put him through school, watched him pass the Shotsai examination, then the Jurin examination. The child grew up, married, and had a grandson. Only then did Huangshan come out of her room, her hair completely white. The clan petitioned for an imperial commendation on her behalf, and the documents were submitted level by level. During the Qianlong era, the imperial decree came down, and an archway was erected. On the day the archway was raised, Huangshan was 71. She wore a newly made red bridal gown, supported by her 2 grandsons' wives, and walked once through the archway. Everyone in the village said the old lady walked steadily, a smile still on her face. But Bao Fuxing told me that very night Huangshan fell ill. She ran a fever, delirious, and through the delirium she repeated one phrase over and over. "Has he come back or not?" Her family asked her who. She said, "Wenling." Wenling's grave was in Hangzhou. He died in Hangzhou, and his bones were never brought back. Only an empty coffin was transported home and buried in the Bao family ancestral grave, a clothes burial mound. By Huizhou custom, when a person dies away from home, the soul must return. Someone in the family must call the soul back. If the call doesn't reach, the soul drifts outside forever. Huangshan waited 40 years for a single "he's back." Huangshan's son did later make a trip to Hangzhou. The pawn shop where his father had stayed had changed hands long ago. Even the street name had been changed. The son stayed in Hangzhou half a month, asking every old person he met, and no one remembered a Bao Wenyuan from Shi County. When he came back, he burned paper money before the clothes burial mound and said, "Father, mother is gone. If you're still out there, come home." That autumn, villagers saw a pair of white butterflies land in front of the clothes burial mound. They stayed an entire afternoon, then flew away.
The next spring, Huangshan passed away. The night before she died, the person keeping vigil said they heard footsteps in her room, 2 people's worth. At dawn, they pushed the door open. Huangshan was dressed neatly, a smile on her face, her body already cold. Bao Fuxing said, "Huangshan's soul is still standing under the memorial archway to this day. She never got her man, so she can't leave. When you pass under her archway at night, she takes you for her husband come back. If she talks to you, don't turn around."
I asked him, "Have you seen her?" He said, "My father saw her." My father kept the ancestral hall for 50 years. One year, on the night before the beginning of autumn, he walked under the archway and saw someone standing beneath it, wearing a red bridal gown, face turned toward the village outskirts. My father stopped, and the person turned around. My father said that face was Huangshan's. Her surname was carved on the archway's base. There was no mistaking it.
When I heard this, a chill ran down my spine. That night I lay in bed, tossing and turning. The scent of osmanthus from the courtyard drifted in wave after wave, like someone standing outside the window, sighing.
During the day, I started making stone rubbings of the archways. Rubbing is delicate work. First you brush the stone surface clean, lay on the rice paper, wet it with a bristle brush so the paper sinks into the carved grooves, wait for the paper to dry halfway, then take a rubbing pad dipped in ink and pat it on bit by bit. The ink can't be too heavy, or it blurs the characters. It can't be too light or they won't show. There were 7 archways and I worked through them one by one. Just the calligraphy on the archway tablets took me 3 full days. During those days of rubbing, I ran my hands over all 7 archways. The tablet on the 6-yali archway bore the characters Imperial Edict, with a line of small script underneath, recording an old matter from the end of the Yuan dynasty. On the Bao Can Filial Piety archway was carved, "Commended for filial piety, Bao Can," and the stone had already crumbled soft, grit fell off at the touch of a fingertip. When I got to the Chastity archways, the grooves were especially deep, as if the carver had put his whole life's strength into them. The villagers said the craftsmen who carved archways had their rules. For a man's archway, the strokes had to be even and rounded. For a woman's archway, the strokes had to be heavy and straight. A woman's archway was bought with her life. If the characters were carved too shallow, they wouldn't hold her down. When I reached the Huangshan archway, the sun was just right. On the tablet were 4 large characters, Chastity cold as frost, and beneath them a line of small script, commemorating the deceased commoner Bao Wenyuan's wife, née Wang. I laid the paper over it, wet it with the brush, and the paper surface billowed and swelled, revealing the stone's grain. In the grain there were several very deep scratches, crisscrossing every which way, not like weathering, more like someone had clawed at it with their fingernails. I measured with my hand. The spacing of the scratches was a bit narrower than an adult man's hand, thin, dense, like a woman's fingernails.
During the midday break, a village boy tending cattle crouched on the ridge of the field watching me rub the stone. After a long while he suddenly said, "Uncle, don't rub that one." I asked why. He said, "My mom said, the words on that archway, if you rub them, they take people away." I said, "Take them how?" He thought for a moment, then said, "My mom said, the words on the archway are their names. Once the name is given to an outsider, the person can't go far." I laughed, didn't take it to heart. That evening I repeated the boy's words to Bao Fusheng. Bao Fusheng didn't laugh. He said, "A child's talk, but it carries the elder's reasoning." That night, I heard the footsteps in the courtyard again. This time I'd learned my lesson. I didn't turn on the light, just pressed myself against the crack of the door and looked out. Under the moonlight, on the blue brick of the courtyard, a shadow was crouching, very short, just a small clump, like a person squatting there. I held my breath and watched for a long time, but the shadow didn't move at all. Later a bird landed in the osmanthus tree, flapped off with a flutter, and the shadow was gone.
The next morning I squatted in the courtyard looking at that blue brick. On the brick's surface was a ring of dampness, wet, its shape like a pair of shoe prints, toes together pointing north. To the north was the main hall, and in the main hall hung that plaque, "Chastity cold as frost."
I asked Bao Fusheng whose old house this was. Bao Fusheng was splitting firewood in the yard. The axe came down, split a log in 2, and he straightened up and said, "Bao Wenyuan's house. Wushi died in this house."
The records of Bao Wenyuan's story in the family genealogy are very brief. Bao Wenyuan, courtesy name Yongzhang, traded salt in Suzhou, married a woman surnamed Wu. Wu was from Xiongning. Just those few lines.
Bao Fusheng told me the full version. Bao Wenyuan was the most capable man in this branch of the Bao family. In his early 20s he followed the clan's merchant caravan to Suzhou, took over a pawnshop outside the Changgate in Suzhou, and did a thriving business. His first wife was from Shi County. After 5 years of marriage, she died of illness, leaving behind a 3-year-old son. The clan arranged for him to remarry, and through a matchmaker in Xiongning, they settled on the eldest daughter of the Wu family, 19 years old, surname Wu.
The year Wu entered the family, Bao Wenyuan did not come back. The matchmaker said he was busy in Suzhou and couldn't get away. Do the wedding ceremony first, and in 2 years she would be taken to join him in Suzhou. And so Wu entered the Bao household, performing the bowing ceremony while holding a wooden memorial tablet. The tablet read "Seat of Bao Wenyuan." By the time she married in, Bao Wenyuan had already been dead for 6 months. He died in the pawn shop in Suzhou. The accountant sent a letter saying the master had died of a sudden illness. He was perfectly fine the night before, and the next morning he never got up. The coffin was held in Suzhou, and because the shop owed money to outside creditors, the creditors seized the coffin and wouldn't let it go. It took 3 years of litigation before his remains were brought back. Not a word of this did Wu know before she entered the family. After the ceremony, when the red veil was lifted from her head, she asked her mother-in-law, "Where is my husband?" The mother-in-law said, "In Suzhou, busy." At night, she saw that memorial tablet lying beside the pillow, and only then did she understand. Bao Fusheng paused here for a moment, then said, "What the genealogy records is that Wu resolved to remain a chaste widow, raised the orphan to adulthood, and was praised as virtuous by the villagers. That's for outsiders to see." The real story is that Wu had no choice at all. Her natal family had already accepted the Bao family's bride price, and from the day she stepped through the door, she was already a person of the Bao family. Whether her husband was dead or alive, she had to stay. What she was guarding was not Bao Wenyuan. She was guarding those 20 taels of bride price.
I asked, and later, what happened to her? Bao Fuxing said, she stayed for 36 years. Her predecessor's son, she raised as her own, supported his studies, and watched him pass the provincial examination. Her predecessor's daughter married into Jishi, and Wu sent her off as if she were her own daughter. On the day of the homecoming visit, she walked her daughter to the village edge and stood beneath the memorial archway, looking for a long time.
On the day of the homecoming visit, mother and daughter stood at the village edge for the better part of an hour. The daughter said, "Mother, come live with me in Jishi." Wu said, "If I leave, who watches over this house?" The daughter said, "A house is dead, people are alive." Wu did not answer and looking at the archway said, "Look at this arch, how grand. Your father never came back, so I earned him this honor." Her daughter never again brought up taking her away. Someone from Jishi passed along word that the old lady standing beneath the archway was something the daughter remembered for the rest of her life. The villagers all said Wu was a virtuous woman. In the 52nd year of Qianlong's reign, the clan petitioned on her behalf, the imperial decree came down, and the archway was erected. On the day the archway went up, Wu was 59 years old. She wore a set of red wedding clothes and walked beneath the arch, very slowly enough that the whole village was wiping away tears.
I asked, why did she wear wedding clothes? Bao Fuxing said, those were the clothes she wore the day she entered the Bao family gate. 36 years, pressed at the bottom of a chest, never touched again. The women of our Bao family wear wedding clothes twice in a lifetime, once for the wedding ceremony, once for the archway. Both times, Wu was holding a memorial tablet.
The Bao family of Tangyue had a women's ancestral hall called Qing Hall. At the east end of the village, separated from the men's hall by an alley, Huizhou was full of ancestral halls. But this was the only one for women. During the Jiaqing reign, a descendant of the Bao family named Bao Wenyuan, who held office away from home, was moved by the suffering of the women in his clan. So he put up the money to build this hall, dedicated to the memorial tablets of the chaste and dutiful women of the Bao family through the generations. The door couplet was carved with 1,000 years of exemplary kindness, one hall of sisters-in-law upholding maternal virtue.
I asked Bao Fuxing what the 3 characters of Qing Hall meant. He said, Qing means purity, Yi means virtue, and it speaks to the moral character of women. The name was chosen by the old clan head. On the day the name was chosen, the clan opened the ancestral hall and invited a scholar. The scholar said that the women of the Bao family, pure their whole lives, deserved those 2 characters. Bao Fuxing said, the hall's name is for the living to hear. Whether the tablets in there recognized those 2 characters, no one ever asked.
I went in to look. Qing Hall was not large, only 2 courtyards deep. Inside, the light was dim, and along the walls stood rows of memorial tablets, densely packed, all of women. The tablets only recorded surnames, not given names, position of Lady Wang of the Bao family, position of Lady Chang of the Bao family, position of Lady Wu of the Bao family, a whole room of women sharing a single Bao family. Lady Wu's tablet was at the far end of the last row, reading position of Lady Wu, second wife of Bao Wenyuan. There was also a stele embedded in the wall of Qing Hall, recording the reason for building the hall, signed by Bao Wenyuan. One line in the inscription read, "The women of my clan, many are bitter in their chastity, unheard in life, unnamed in death. My heart cannot bear it. I squatted in front of the stele for a long time. Unheard in life, unnamed in death." These 6 characters were heavier than all the tablets in the hall.
Bao Fuxing said the women's hall had a rule. On the night before the start of autumn, someone had to keep vigil in the hall, lighting an oil lamp that must not go out. If the lamp went out, it meant one of the women in the hall was leaving and could not be kept. He had kept vigil for 50 years, the lamp had gone out 3 times. The first time, the next year the village was hit by a flood. The second time, the next year a fire broke out in the hall and burned down half of it. The third time, the next year his father died. I asked him whether he had seen anything when the lamp went out. He said, the person keeping vigil does not fear the lamp going out, what they fear is someone speaking in the hall before the lamp goes out. The night the lamp went out the first time, I heard someone crouched under the offering table crying, the sound pressed low, as if afraid of being heard. The second time, no one cried, but someone sighed, sighing half the night. The third time, the year my father died, there was no sound at all, the lamp just went out, cleanly. I asked him, in those 3 times, did you light it again? He said, no. When the lamp is out, it's out. If you relight it, you're lighting something else. I said, then let me keep vigil for you one night. Bao Fuxing looked at me, said nothing, and that counted as a yes.
On the night before the start of autumn, I moved a bamboo chair into Qingyi Hall and sat down. The oil lamp sat on the offering table, its flame a thin, tiny wisp. The hall at night was so quiet it was frightening. Even the sound of insects was gone. In the middle of the night, the flame suddenly stretched long, straight and narrow, as if someone were blowing at the lamp. Every hair on my body stood up. I stared at the flame, watched it waver, watched it straighten, watched it shrink back. After it shrank back, I heard someone sigh from behind the offering table. So soft, so brief, like a sigh swallowed back before it was finished.
At dawn, Bao Fuxing came in. He looked at the lamp first, then at me. I said, the lamp didn't go out. He nodded, walked to the offering table, and suddenly froze. I went over to look. On the offering table there was an extra pair of red embroidered shoes, tiny, with twin lotuses stitched on the toes, looking as good as new. Bao Fuxing picked up the shoes and said, this is a rule passed down from the elders. The person keeping vigil must prepare a pair of shoes for the young women in the hall. They walked their whole lives, their shoes wore out, and they could walk no further. Give them a pair of new shoes, and they can walk again. I asked, why red? He said, wedding clothes are red. In their whole lives, that is the only color they remember. Making the rubbing of the Wu family archway was the 5th day's work. That morning fog had risen, and the cluster of memorial archways loomed faint and hazy in the mist, like a row of standing people. I did my usual routine, pasted the paper, applied the ink. On the archway's top plaque were the 4 characters Fortitude through 3 winters, and on the crossbeam a line, the crimson brush leaves its fragrance. Old ink was wedged deep in the grooves of the characters, black and gleaming. The fog was heavy that day. My hands were cold when I pasted the paper, and it wrinkled, so I peeled it off and pasted it again. As I smoothed the paper flat with my fingers the second time, I noticed that the stone beneath the archway pillar was covered in lines and grooves. I squatted down for a closer look. They were claw marks, 5 deep gouges sunk into the bluestone, as though something had been clinging to that pillar for years and years. I asked Bao Fuxing about it. He said, the old folks said it was a dog. But there wasn't a dog in the village that could claw marks that deep. I finished the first rubbing, packed up the paper, and went back to the old house for breakfast. The next morning I went to collect the rubbing. A rubbing has to stay on the stone overnight for the ink to dry completely. When I lifted off the paper, I froze. Right beside the clean, crisp strokes of the characters, there was an extra line of small writing, like it had seeped through as a water stain, faint and blurry. The handwriting looked like a name. 3 characters. The middle one was impossible to make out.
I carried the paper to Bao Fuxing. He put on his reading glasses, studied it for a long time, and his hand trembled. He said, "This is the lady's personal name." I asked what was she called. He said, Yunyang. The genealogy records it, the Wu woman given name Yunyang. but the clan never allowed that name to be carved onto the archway or written into any document. When the archway was put up, the approval from above only had 3 characters: Bao Wu Shi, the Wu woman of the Bao family.
I said, then where did this line come from? Bao Fuxing handed the paper back to me and said, don't ask it. Ask yourself. You spent the whole day rubbing the stone. The ink was fresh, the paper was pasted by your own hands. If those characters had been there yesterday, you would have seen them when you pasted the paper. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out.
That night, as if some ghost had led me there, I walked into the middle of the archway cluster. The moon was huge, and the shadows of the 7 archways lay flat and even on the ground. Under the Wu family archway someone was standing. 20 or 30 paces away, I couldn't make out the face. I only saw a red wedding dress and red embroidered shoes on her feet, toes pointing toward the village outskirts. She just stood there without moving.
I stood there a long time. In the end, I didn't dare walk over. I stared at her for a long while, and then all at once I noticed something. The moon was behind me, so her shadow should have stretched out toward the village. But that shadow was coming toward me. A person facing out of the village should not have had a shadow pointing at me. I stepped back, and the shadow shifted too. I didn't dare look anymore. I hung my head, followed the field path along the edge of the threshing ground, and made a wide loop back to the old house.
On the way back, my legs were rubber. I asked Bao Fuxing who the Wu woman was waiting for. Bao Fuxing said, the Wang woman was waiting for her husband. What the Wu woman was waiting for? I've been thinking about that for 50 years. Later I figured it out. She was waiting for a verdict. All her life, when she knelt for the wedding ceremony, she held a spirit tablet. When the archway was raised, she was still wearing her wedding dress. From beginning to end, no one ever said to her, you are a woman of the Bao family now. After finishing the rubbings at Tangyue, I took some time to visit Changcan. Changcan is in Huizhou district, a Bagua village. The lanes are laid out according to the 8 trigrams. At the village entrance is a water mouth, and beside it sits a shu'u, a local shrine. The Baoluan pavilion of the Luo Ancestral Hall has some of the finest wood carvings in Jiangnan. Lions, phoenixes, carps leaping over the dragon gate, carved so dense there wasn't a gap. I shot an entire roll of film there. The Luo family is a major clan in the village. The old man who looks after the ancestral hall is a Luo too, and I called him Uncle Luo. When he heard I was from the provincial capital, he kept me for the night in the old residence. The old house has 3 courtyards in a row. The second floor is an embroidery tower, the women's quarters, and no one has lived there since the Republic era. Old timber was piled at the top of the stairs, covered in dust. Uncle Luo said, don't touch anything upstairs, and if you hear noises at night, don't go up.
That night, I did hear the floorboards. Not once or twice, it was rhythmic. From the east end to the west end, a pause, then back from the west end to the east end. Like someone in wooden clogs, walking up there all night.
The next day I asked Uncle Luo. He said, that's the Luo family's old maiden aunt. She was betrothed during the Guangxu reign. The man was in the tea business in Hangzhou. Both families had even set the date. A year before the wedding, the man died in Hangzhou. The old maiden aunt was 17 that year. She said, the dowry is all ready, but he's gone. Then I'll just wait. She waited 45 years, living on this embroidery tower, and at 62 she died up there.
I asked, why didn't she remarry? Uncle Luo said, in Shunkan, once you're betrothed, you belong to that family. If the man dies, a girl who keeps to the widowed gate counts as having chastity and conviction, and the clan respects her. But if she breaks the engagement and marries again, that's called losing virtue, and it makes the whole clan hold its head down. The old maiden aunt was the clan's face, and she believed that reasoning herself. But she never actually crossed the threshold into the man's home, so she wasn't a Luo wife, and she wasn't an unmarried daughter either. After death she couldn't be buried in the ancestral graves, and her spirit tablet couldn't enter the ancestral hall. It could only sit in the shu. Uncle Luo said, on the tablet in the shu was written Luo family daughter, awaiting her name. Awaiting her name, that means waiting. She waited her whole life, and even in death, she was still awaiting.
That afternoon I went to the shu. It was lower than the ancestral hall with a narrow door. You had to bow your head going in. Against the wall was a long table, and on it sat a few spirit tablets, sparse and scattered, all of them reading daughter awaiting her name. The oldest one had its paint peeling, with only the two characters Luo family faintly visible. In front of the table was an incense burner, the ash fresh. Uncle Luo said that on the old maiden aunt's death anniversary, the clan would come to offer incense, once a year. I asked who set that rule. He said, nobody. 1 year on her anniversary, a villager passed the shu'u, smelled incense and went in to look. There in the burner were 3 sticks of incense, burning perfectly even. From that year on, every anniversary, the clan came to burn incense. Who first started it, no one would say.
I asked him, the floorboards creaking, is it her still walking? Uncle Luo said, it sounded for decades. The villagers say she got used to walking, so she can't stop. I think it's more that she has something on her mind she can't let go of. Walking or not, it's not up to her.
On my way back from Chungcan, I made a detour through Tunxi. Tunxi Old Street was the old street of the Huizhou merchants. Blue flagstone road, wooden plank doors on both sides of every shopfront. Shops selling inkstones, selling tea, selling brushes and ink. I had a bowl of hairy tofu and bought 2 stacks of chengsanteng paper, and by the time the sky was fully dark, I finally reached the old Grand Bridge at the end of the street. The old Grand Bridge was built during the Jiajing reign of the Ming Dynasty. Its proper name is Jinhai Bridge, spanning the Lushui River. It's a stone arch bridge, the arches nested one after another. Looking at it at night, it was pitch black, like a row of open mouths.
During the day, the old Grand Bridge was lively. On the bridge deck, shoulder pole carriers, cart pushers, vegetable sellers, people coming and going. Freshly washed clothes hung drying over the bridge railings. A barber sat at the bridgehead giving a kid a haircut. The kid was crying, the barber was cursing. But at night, there wasn't a single person on the bridge, only the wind. Boss Cheng said that when this bridge was built during the Jiajing years, 7 pinewood piles were sunk into the riverbed, and beneath the piles a stone ox was pressed down. The stone ox suppressed the water, and also the souls beneath the bridge. The ring on the ox's nose was made of iron, and at night it would ring. He said he'd heard it once, in the dead of night, a single ding-dang, just one sound, like someone leading an ox across the bridge. Boss Cheng also told another story. A few years back, a young man lived at the other end of the bridge. One night, crossing the bridge, he heard someone in the water calling his name, and reflexively answered. Starting the next day, the young man heard that voice every night, calling outside his window, for half a month. The young man was terrified and went to ask an old man in the village. The old man said, "You answered it, so it takes that as you agreeing, now it's latched onto you." Later, the young man got married and moved to Huizhou, and never came back. Boss Cheng said, "Things on this bridge, you can answer for them, but you can't run from them. Once you answer, you have to go and talk it out clearly with it." At the bridgehead there was a wonton stall. The stall owner was surnamed Chang, in his 50s or 60s. Seeing me standing alone on the bridge staring at the water, he called me over to sit and said, "Young man, don't stand in the middle of the bridge at night."
I asked why. He said, under this bridge, the souls pass through. When Huizhou people went out to do business and died away from home, their souls had to come back. Walking overland, they were afraid of getting lost, so they all took the water route drifting down the Xianan River and passing under this bridge. Once across this bridge, they'd entered Huizhou, home was near. As he spoke, he pointed at the water. Listen.
I pricked up my ears. The water rushed and gurgled, and underneath, sure enough, there was another sound mixed in, one beat after another, like someone calling out. Not calling for help, calling for a person. A drawn-out tone, over and over, like someone calling a name through a layer of water. I asked Boss Chang what it was calling. He said, if you can't make it out, that's exactly right. If you could make it out, then it was calling your name, and if you answered once, it would come up. As Boss Chang spoke, the water in his pot boiled. He dropped half a bowl of wontons in, scooped them out, and set them aside to cool, saying, "This bowl is saved for you, eat it after you come back from the bridge." I asked how he knew I was going back on the bridge. He said, "Just now you stood at the bridgehead a long while without moving, you heard it. Anyone who hears it always goes back up on the bridge to listen once more." Later, when I came back from the bridge, the stall was already packed up, but the bowl was still there. The wontons had gone cold, a film of oil floating on the surface of the soup. Boss Chang wasn't around, but the stove was still warm. That night I stood in the middle of the bridge. The calling in the water grew closer and closer, clearer and clearer. I was almost able to make out those 3 syllables when suddenly a gust of wind came through the arch and scattered all the sound. I shivered, hurried across the bridge, and didn't look back again.
The rubbing collection needed a photo of Huangshan as a background image, so I went up Huangshan again, stayed on the mountain, and waited for the sea of clouds. That evening, the summit of Bright Summit Peak was packed with people waiting to watch the sunset. The sea of clouds stretched from beneath our feet all the way to the horizon. A vast expanse of white, like a heavy snowfall. The distant peaks poked through like islands in the sea. When the sun went down, the cloud sea was dyed gold and red, and the crowd cheered. I didn't think it was all that beautiful. I just felt the cloud sea was too white, so white it didn't seem real.
Beside me, a photographer with a long lens muttered, "Today the clouds are flat as a mirror, no layers." He said you have to shoot the cloud sea just before sunrise. When the clouds roll, only when they roll do they make waves. I asked him what it looked like when the clouds rolled. He said, like a person turning over in sleep. My heart gave a jolt. I didn't ask anything else.
I couldn't sleep that night, so I went back up to Bright Summit Peak alone. The moon had come out, and the cloud sea had turned silver, lying there quietly. I stood at the edge of the cliff and looked down. Suddenly, a shadow rose up out of the middle of the cloud sea. Faint and indistinct, like a row of stone pillars, 7 of them, one next to another, exactly like the memorial archway cluster at the entrance of Tangyue Village. Beneath the one in the middle stood a woman in a red wedding dress.
I blinked hard. The cloud sea turned over in its sleep, and the shadow was gone. The silver-white clouds were still there, quiet, as if nothing had happened.
Back at the guest house, the tourist sharing the room with me asked if I'd seen anything. I said I saw clouds. He said, "On this mountain, don't go looking around at night. There are people in the clouds." I asked what people. He said, "I don't know either, but my grandfather told me that on Huangshan, when the clouds rise, they can hide anything, and they can also fail to hide anything." His grandfather was a porter at the foot of the mountain, who spent his whole life carrying loads up the slopes. On the way down, I met an old monk at Xiguang Pavilion, sitting on the threshold soaking up the sun. When he saw me, he said out of nowhere, "The sea of clouds is the mountain's dream. When the mountain sleeps, whatever it dreams, it shows. What you saw is something the mountain has been keeping for you." I asked, "What does the mountain keep?" He said, "That's for you to ask yourself. Whatever you can't let go of in your heart, the mountain keeps. If you can't let it go, it will show it for you, again and again until you let it go."
I asked him, "Master, how many years have you been on this mountain? He said, 40 years. I said, in 40 years, you must have watched the cloud sea countless times. He said, I watch it every day, and it's never finished. The cloud sea is like the human heart, on the surface it looks one way, underneath it's another. You see it as calm, but underneath it's churning. After saying this, he looked at me again and said, there's something on your mind. It's about a woman, isn't it? I didn't answer. He didn't ask again. He stood up, brushed off his robe, and walked back into the temple. After a few steps, he turned back and said, the mountain keeps it for you, but it doesn't carry it for you. Whether you can bear the weight, that's up to you.
I sat in front of the Ziguang Pavilion gate and thought all afternoon. I thought of my grandmother. She was also from Huizhou, from Xiong Village in Shi County. She married north of the Yangtze and never went back to her natal home her whole life. She told me many stories about Huizhou, about the archways, about the ancestral halls, and one line I still remember to this day. The archways of Huizhou were not built for the women. They were built for the living to see. Whether a woman lived well in this life, no one looks. But how tall her archway stands. Everyone looks. After returning from Mount Huang, I asked Bao Fuxing to bring out the clan genealogy, so I could look up Bao Wenyuan's branch. The genealogy was a thread-bound volume, the paper already yellowed, rustling loudly as I turned the pages. As I flipped through, Bao Fuxing pointed things out from the side. The first few pages covered how the Bao family had moved to Tangyue, starting from the end of the Southern Song Dynasty, and for several hundred years it recorded births, deaths, illnesses, and old age. For the men, it noted their courtesy names, their official titles, what business they had done. The characters filled the page densely. For the women, most entries were just one line. Married a woman of such and such clan, bore so many sons and daughters. Some didn't even include the surname, writing only nay so and so. I counted. In the first 3 pages, 27 women had married into the Bao family, and not one had a given name recorded. Bao Wenyuan's entry was very brief. Bao Wenyuan, courtesy name Yongzhang, dealt in salt in Suzhou, married a woman of the Wu clan, given name Yuliang, from Shoning. Below that was another line that had been blotted out with ink, covered so thickly it seemed someone didn't want it seen. I held the genealogy up to the lamp and looked at it for a long time against the light. The ink wasn't applied evenly. A few strokes showed through. Reading them together, they said, the Wu woman entered the Bao gate, performing the rites with a spirit tablet in her arms. The groom was not her actual husband.
I glanced at Bao Fuxing. He sat on the threshold smoking his pipe, the smoke completely shrouding him. He said, the old clan head did that. When the archway was being erected, the authorities wanted to check the genealogy, to verify whether this woman was a legal primary wife married through proper matchmaking. A wife who married a spirit tablet in place of a dead groom doesn't count as a legal primary wife. The archway couldn't be built. The clan spent 3 years on that one archway, submitted the paperwork 3 times. They couldn't let it fail on that. So the old clan head sat by the lamp and covered up that line. Bao Fuxing said that on the night he blotted out the words, the old clan head sat alone in the ancestral hall until midnight. The next day, he called the clan stewards together and said, the archway goes up, the words stay covered. None of you are to say a single word to the Wu woman about this. Someone asked, what if she asks on her own? The old clan head said, she won't ask. If she does, you tell her the genealogy says it plainly, she is the primary wife, properly married through matchmaking. Later, everyone in the clan said the old clan head had done only one thing against his conscience in his entire life, but no one could say where the wrong actually lay. I asked Bao Fuxing why the old clan head was so determined to build this archway for Wu Yuliang that he would rather deface the genealogy. Bao Fuxing said, for reputation. During the Qianlong era, the Bao family's salt business in Yangzhou was at its peak. The owners competed not just in silver, but in the prestige of their household gateways. The clan had produced a minister, had produced filial sons, the only thing missing was a chastity archway. For a salt merchant family, once the archway went up, their backbone stiffened. Those 36 years Wu Yuliang guarded were for the Bao family. What she guarded wasn't her husband, it was a piece of the Bao family's face. When he finished, he added, actually, that's not entirely right either. What Wu Yuliang guarded was the principle she herself believed in. She believed it, so to her it was real. I said, then did Wu Yuliang herself know? Did she know her archway was produced by covering up the record? Bao Fuxing finished his pipe, tapped the ashes out on his shoe sole, and said, she didn't know. My father told me when Wu Yuliang died, my father was right there. A few days before she passed, her spirits suddenly brightened. She sat in the courtyard every day, watching people pack up her wedding dress. She said the date for the archway ceremony was set, and she was going to wear that garment. My father said Wu Yuliang believed in only one thing her whole life. Once she entered the Bao gate, she was a person of the Bao family. That archway was her rightful status. And that status was more real than life itself. If you tried to tell her about covering up records, she wouldn't understand it, and she wouldn't believe it.
Bao Fuxing's legs suddenly swelled a few days before the beginning of autumn, and he couldn't walk. The duty of watching over the ancestral hall fell to me. Bao Fuxing lay in bed and called me to his side, giving me 3 instructions. 1. Keep the lamp oil filled, and set the oil lamp in the center of the offering altar. Don't move it. 2. If you hear noises in the latter half of the night, don't open the door, don't make a sound. 3. If the lamp goes out, don't light it a second time. Before dawn, don't leave the ancestral hall. I said, I've remembered the first 2, but the third, what if the lamp really does go out? Bao Fuxing said, if the lamp goes out, you sit in the hall and wait until dawn. When dawn comes, everything can be talked about. On the night before the beginning of autumn, I did as he said. I lit the oil lamp in Kanjiatang and moved a bamboo chair over to sit down. In the latter half of the night, wind crept in through the crack under the door. The oil lamp's flame trembled, then suddenly straightened. A single straight line, as if it were listening for something. I heard footsteps, coming from the direction of the memorial archways. The sound of embroidered shoes stepping on stone slabs, step by step, neither hurried nor slow, entering the village, passing the alley entrance, coming toward the ancestral hall.
The footsteps stopped at the hall's door. I heard someone breathing, very soft, very slow, as if they had walked a long, long way. Then came the sound of fingernails scraping wood, once, twice, 3 times, scraping against the hall's door panels. I gripped the arms of the bamboo chair, my knuckles turning white. The sound stopped. After a long while, the sound of embroidered shoes on stone slabs rose again, step by step, walking back, all the way to the memorial archways, where it vanished. I walked to the door and peered out through the crack.
Under the moonlight, in the very center of Wu's arch, stood a figure. Red wedding dress, red embroidered shoes, face turned toward the village's edge. The same one I had seen in the sea of clouds at Huangshan. She stood there for a long time, so long I thought dawn would never come. Suddenly, she slowly turned around, facing the ancestral hall. Dozens of steps away, I couldn't make out her face. I only saw her raise a hand, as if she wanted to say something. The wind lifted her wedding dress, the hem turning over once in the moonlight before settling back down.
When the wind stopped, I suddenly understood the shape of her lips. She wasn't speaking words, it was 2 characters, over and over, just 2 characters. I read them once, then again, who am I? A person who had waited her whole life was asking who she was.
I thought of what Bao Fuxing had said. Lady Wang waited for her husband. Waited for a year back. Lady Wu wasn't waiting for Bao Wenyuan. She never met Bao Wenyuan. She held a spirit tablet, kept vigil at a memorial tablet. She spent her whole life with a name. What she waited for was someone to tell her. All these years you kept vigil, they weren't for nothing. You count as a person.
When dawn came, the space beneath the archway was empty. I went back to Kanjiatang to check the lamp, it was still burning. Those two red embroidered shoes on the offering altar, at some point, their toes had turned to face outward.
The next spring, the rubbing collection was printed. That year, the Tangyue Archway complex began its major restoration, with provincial funds allocated. The women's ancestral hall was slated for repairs. When I entered Qing Hall again, the workers were replacing the altar table. Wu's memorial tablet had been changed to a new one, and on it was written, Bao Wu Shi Yunyang's seat. 5 characters, neat and upright.
I asked the villagers who had added that name.
The foreman in charge of the restoration was surnamed Wang. He said that on the day they swapped the tablets, when they took down the old one, the wood had already rotted. The characters had been traced over with a small knife several times. The person who traced them had a steady hand, but the strokes were crooked, as if copying from something, afraid to press too hard. On the back of the old tablet, someone had scratched 2 characters with their fingernails. Shallow marks that read, Yunyang. Foreman Wang said those characters weren't newly carved. How many years old they were, no one could say. The villagers said it was something Bao Fuxing had instructed before he died. Bao Fuxing passed away the night before beginning of autumn the previous year. He had been watching over the hall, and in the deep hours of the night, the oil lamp went out. By morning he had no breath left. The villagers all said he died of old age, 74, and that counted as a happy funeral. I stood in the women's hall, looking at the rows upon rows of tablets. All these women in this one room shared a single Bao family name. Only Wu had her own name. I suddenly remembered what Bao Fuxing had said. That Wu had waited her whole life, and deserved a name. She was of the Bao family, but she also had to be herself. That night I left Tangyue, passing by the archway complex. The moon was very bright, and the shadows of the 7 archways lay flat on the ground, neatly lined up. Beneath Wu's archway sat a pair of red embroidered shoes, their toes pointing toward the village exit.
I didn't pick them up. I figured she had probably gone. She waited 36 years, then waited who knows how many more, and finally she got those words. The words weren't said by anyone, they were spoken by that new tablet. Her name was Yunyang. She had lived. She had been here. She was a person with a name.
I later asked around about Bao Fuxing's funeral arrangements. The villagers said that on the night he left, before the oil lamp went out, he first heard someone speaking in the ancestral hall. A woman's voice, saying, "The lamp oil, I've filled it." The caretaker answered it. The villagers said that when Bao Fuxing passed, there was a smile on his face. The shoe toes pointed outward, toward the road leaving the village. That road led to Tungxi, to the Xianan River, to all the faraway places the people of Huizhou could never return to.
I stood beneath the archway for a long time. The wind blew over from the grain-drying ground, carrying the scent of osmanthus. I heard a soft laugh behind me, like a woman finally putting something down, or like the wind whispering through the ridge beasts atop the archway, a low moan. I didn't turn around.
Back in the provincial capital, I had the rubbing of Wu's archway mounted separately as a hanging scroll and put it up in my office. A colleague came to look and said, "Why are there faint water marks in the grooves of these characters? Like they've been wept on." I said nothing. The next year, during Ming, I received a letter sent from Shi County, and signed. On the letter paper was only one line. "The shoes. She wore them away."
The story is finished. What do you think? If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. New urban legend every day.